Hello again, everyone. It is time for another episode of the Community Connection Show, the show that brings you positive stories and encouraging news as we interview top leaders in every sector of the community. And now, here is your host, national speaker and best-selling author, Ryan Sauers.
Hello again, everybody, and welcome to another Community Connection Show with Ryan Sauers. I'm super excited today to have my friend, Gyner Ozgul. He is the CEO of RAFTRx on the show with me. Gyner, how are you doing, my friend?
Good, Ryan. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. I'm so excited to have you here. You and I were just talking, and we'll get into it more, about the importance, before we went on air, of being authentic. So what you see is what you get, folks. What you see is what you get. But, you got so much we want to talk about in this 30-minute show. Let's just start off for the people who don't know you, about who you are and your background.
Let's do a quick version of the background.
Okay, yeah, that's exactly.
There's a long version and a quick version.
Yeah, we'll do the quick version.
The quick version. My parents are both immigrants, so I'm a first generation. I always say that to people. And I grew up in a little town called Summit, southwest of Chicago. So my dad, for the first half of his career, was a line cook, and for the second half of his career was a general carpentry guy in a factory. So that had a lot of impression on me as a kid in terms of work ethic and how you think about family and how you position yourself. Kind of grew up in that neighborhood, went the whole public school route just like a lot of people in America. So I'm no different than anyone else. But I had an opportunity. I started a little local Burger King job 3 blocks from my house, and 11 years later, my first career, I ended up leaving as a regional director of operations. So,
wow.
If you would ask the 16-year-old me, am I going to make a career out of this thing? I would have said, I'm nuts. I'm just trying to get enough money to go see the movies, maybe take someone out on a date. I wasn't really thinking long-term as a 16-year-old. And I met a lot of great people in those days, and they had an impression on me, and I learned a lot about P&L management and people management in my quick service restaurant days. And then fast forward in 2003, I joined a company called Ecolab, who owned a business called GCS. I was a branch manager for them in Chicago, and just the short of that story was GCS was a platform at the time Ecolab was trying to build for commercial kitchen repair. So very high-skilled tradesmen, all W-2 tradesmen that work in commercial kitchens. So stadiums, hospitals, universities, restaurants, anywhere you see a commercial kitchen and or HVAC and refrigeration, these were the guys, right? So they're very skilled. I spent a total of 21 years in that industry, culminating with that industry being sold out of Ecolab in 2017 into private equity, where I'd been for 8+ years now. And that business became a business called Smart Care Solutions. Now you can look them up on the internet, but very successful business, much larger, with 1,200 technicians now. I left there as the president and CEO of that business, and then joined RAFTRx last year, actually in the end of last year, December, as the CEO of RAFTRx, which is an up-and-coming platform that does residential insurance-based re-roofing. So yes, I am in the roofing space.
Well, congratulations. And, us getting to know each other has been awesome. So, it's funny, you talked about those Burger King days. There's nothing probably that tests you by fire more than the restaurant or the being behind a register. I was a Chick-fil-A guy in the early days. I think I should have stayed on. I would have done quite well. But, it's the real deal, and
Yes.
It's what you started, you said, when you were 15, 16, like I did, probably never, whatever you ended up with. That's a great career path, a lot of work ethic there.
Yeah, there's a funny little story there, and I'll make it short. I got hired as a 15-year-old, then got fired 2 months later as a 15-year-old because they didn't allow 15-year-olds anymore, and then got hired 2 months after that when I turned 16 back. So only time I've been fired in a job, but it was very impactful for me as a kid. And what I also will say about that is I agree with you. It's a lot of hours. It's a commitment. In the restaurant field, you learn a lot about people management in those businesses. I mean, the turnover in the restaurant industry is well over 100%.
Oh yeah.
So, most people don't know that or recognize how difficult it is to hire, retain, and retrain people on a consistent basis.
Yeah.
So it taught me a lot and a lot of patience.
Well, the early days of Chick-fil-A, when Chick-fil-A was just in Atlanta, in the malls, whatever, I learned quickly when I wasn't doing what I was supposed to do. They made me go back and peel lemons and wash the dishes. So I quickly learned, you know, you either do what you're supposed to and exceed, or not, exactly. But well, tell me a little bit about this. Everybody sees the title CEO. Everybody says CEO and thinks different things, but we'll kind of pivot a little bit to this. But what is your overall leadership philosophy that drives you as a human, as a person, as a CEO?
I lead with being a human, always. The title, the title is important in certain scenarios, right? If I'm talking to bankers or investors, there's the title is a necessity in terms of validity of the conversation you're going to have with a group of people, right?
Mm-hmm.
In general, I don't feel like the title has that much meaning, to me at least. So I can't speak for other CEOs, so this isn't me taking a shot. What's more important is the leadership style of connecting with the people that you work with and giving them a vision and an understanding of where you want a business to go, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then starting to deliver on it is really important. That's my leadership style. So I'm a game of three, guys. If you've ever heard like the top three priority rules, I try really hard to keep it in like threes, because I think there's good to have narrow focus so people all align to a common vision. So you'll see that in my leadership style. You'll see a very personal approach. I don't believe in hierarchies where I can't talk to people in the organization. As a matter of fact, when I've had people report into me who say things like, "Well, I'd really like you to tell me before you talk to Joe." Like, no, I want to have access to whoever I want to have access to.
100%.
You shouldn't be worried about it because I don't believe in retribution, right? So if they tell me something about you that I don't agree with, I may coach you, but I'm not going to like hold you accountable for that. And the flip side of the coin is I want them to feel like I'm accessible,
Mm-hmm.
right? I don't want this title to be this invisible barrier, that people don't feel they have accessibility with me on. That's not something I enjoy.
So how did I think you were saying you were a CEO or president COO before.
Yeah.
Did that help you a little bit coming into the CEO role of just being a little bit in that role?
Yeah, I mean that role, operations roles are all about people and process,
Mm-hmm.
right? And what you learn when you're managing, we had I think 1,200 technicians and probably a couple hundred support staff in that. I don't know the exact numbers, but it was a big piece, right? And as you get larger, your accessibility becomes a problem, right? Just giving you a sense, when we were growing up until about 600 technicians, I would write personal birthday cards for our technicians every month, right? I couldn't do it after that because it got bigger than me, and the guys would always joke around with me about that. But that was really it had a lot of lasting impressions. So to answer your question, absolutely, it prepared me, right? I think the experience I got there in terms of process orientation, how to talk to people, how to talk to owners, right? I'm in a private equity backed platform build and talking to owners and navigating the whole idea of what it takes from go to successful entrepreneurial based businesses to a platform build. I wouldn't have had that experience if I didn't have that role.
So it's fair to say, I mean, I know I agree with this, but so every experience you, as listeners are listening, you've gone through in your life has kind of prepared you for this moment.
Yes, it totally is. And I always, when I was younger, I had a little bit of that chip on my shoulder, like, oh, experience doesn't mean nothing. I am, let me put my heavy coat on and I'll show you guys how smart I am. When people told me that experience was like the biggest thing that helps your success in your career, I agree with that now. And really where that comes from, Ryan, is like the failures I've had in my career have been detrimental to my success in the future because I learned from them, but also they've made me a better person,
Yeah.
right? And you just don't get that enough earlier in your life, right? You know, I I won't poke fun at it, but you know what? If the worst thing that happens to you in high school is you get a D, right? Yeah, I mean your weekends ruined, or maybe you go to like maybe you're in detention or something like that. But man, when you have a role where you have a failure that you had a process you put in place and it just didn't work, and you impacted people's lives, like it changes you as a person. And I would say it makes you a better person because you figure out what you can't do going forward.
Yeah, and I was just to piggyback on again. I was thinking the other day, every time I see it now at another, as you saw, another birthday, another gift of appreciate the birthday wish. Um, I now go back through my mental inventory and say, I've seen something like this in the past. You draw from it, like I think what you're saying, and go. So you have your peak performance powers, but you also have that wisdom that I too at a younger age thought, that's overrated. Well, it's not really. I mean, I think wisdom's a powerful thing if you use it correctly.
No, wisdom is a powerful thing if you use it correctly, right? And I'd say that the most important thing to me was the human forward aspect, which I probably didn't learn to like my mid 30s with a lot of coaching, right? And look, coaches, therapists, they're all good things, by the way.
Oh
Just
yeah,
make sure you listen.
yeah.
I always tell people that, like, don't go into it with a skeptical view. Like, understand that coaches and therapists are usually really good independents who don't know that much about you, and they give you very unfiltered feedback, and you should take it. But yeah, I mean, the idea of leaning forward with being human first, like, it's a very powerful approach in leadership.
You and I spoke a little bit one time. We were talking about authenticity, and I'm not going to put words in your mouth, but in my opinion, I'm trying not to do it. You can't fake authentic leadership.
No.
I mean, you've led a lot of people, whatever your title's been over the years. You've probably seen people that try to maybe put on airs of that, and then the real deal. But do you agree? I mean, there's no faking of that. People can see through it.
No, they definitely could see through it. I'll give you an example. Like when COVID happened a number of years ago, and setting aside all the political beliefs for a second, at the time, a majority of us believed there was an issue there, right? Um, you know, my last business at our worst, we were something like 60% down year on year revenue, like just because COVID, the restaurant space just got like decimated for a
Hmm.
period of time. And, we had to get everybody in the company on the phone, and we made hard decisions then. And we were very authentic about it. We just said, look, we are at this point in time in the history of our business, this is more about keeping the business running in a healthy manner than it is about people's feelings or anything else. Because at this point, we don't know where this thing is headed. And, that means, yeah, some people may lose their job. We don't like it. But we have to think about the good of the overall business and the thousands of families that we are going to keep employed, right?
Hmm.
So that authentic piece became detrimental. And I remember up to a year and a half later, I get on, I do monthly town halls with those teams, and they would just say to me, "Hey, what inning?" They had this baseball analogy. What inning are we in? It was like sixth inning, seventh inning. What they wanted to is like, are we almost back to normal?
Right.
Right. Um, and that if I wasn't authentic with them, they would have never trusted me in the process as we were making those changes.
Isn't it powerful though, as a leader? I think you and I share so much in common that when you're just flat out transparent and human, and telling people not what they want to hear, what you want them to, facade, but just saying, here's where we are. We can either come together. It's not perfect. That really the people that embrace that become such blood loyal ambassadors for your organization.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. Because when they believe that you're a human being, when they believe that you're being authentic, and to some extent, there's a last piece to that, which is the vulnerability of it. Like,
Hmm.
hey, when you make mistakes, just admit it.
Yeah.
Don't hide behind them. Don't try to make excuses for them. Make a mistake and move on. Right? The human part, making mistakes comes with it. Just be willing to fess up to it and be willing to make it right. I think that's so
I was going to say, I didn't mean to cut you off there. I was going to say, I have this saying, if it goes back probably to my 30s, it's longer a problem sits, the worse it gets. And when you
no,
make
that's
a,
right.
if you just sit around and keep talking about it, but America as a whole is a very forgiving society. If you jump on it and transparently say, hey, I screwed up. But just to me is when you start making excuses and stuff, it just, no matter what business or thing you do, people start to really question it.
Yeah, I always tell people there's a difference between being uh, in authenticity and honesty, right?
Mhm.
Um, there's a difference between being tactful and being like trying to placate people,
Yeah.
right? The ones that try to placate, they get themselves into a little bit of a trick bag, right? Because they're trying to create a narrative to smooth out a mistake or a problem. I say don't do that at all. Just, just be upfront with them and be tactful, right?
Right.
This happened. It was on me, or this portion of it was on me. Here's what I'm doing to make it right. And I want you guys to know that, right?
I love it. Love it.
So
Well, let me ask you a question. So, what would you tell? I'm just going to drop back again to your background. Somebody who wants to be a CEO one day, whatever industry, they want to be a top executive or whatever. They're listening to you now. What would you tell those guys, 30 years ago when we were, getting detention or getting the D in high school? Hey, here's what's important, man. Here's what you should really think about if you could tell my or your younger self.
yeah. Two things. One is learn how to manage people really, really well. Like spend the time, understand even the hard ones, because the hard ones teach you something,
Mhm.
right? But the people part of this, if you're going to be a CEO or any title you aspire to be as a leader, let's just say setting titles aside, the ability to manage people and lead them is important, but that comes from a foundation of being a people person and really trying to understand how people think and work and how collaboration works and things like that, right? The second piece is honestly what I learned in my restaurant days, which is like you got to really understand a P&L and how it works and spend the time,
Mhm.
right? Because when you understand the P&L and L and how it works, you can ask the right questions to influence the direction of the business and the strategy, right? But when you put a strategy in place that doesn't connect with the P&L or your people, you really have a strategy with no foundation, right? So like really understand your people, really understand your P&L. If you get those two foundational skills, you can be very successful as a leader.
It's like direction, alignment, commitment, something I always say, but that alignment between the two, as I hear you saying, you can't create a strategy with your people that doesn't exist. If you're losing more money than you're making or vice versa, it's all out of alignment, right?
That's right. That's right.
So that's good advice. Now, in the trends of your newest endeavor, now you've come into the roofing and exterior industry and with a plethora of experience to apply to it, come into it in kind of a new way and applying new things. Been your take? You came in what December and you've kind of come in and
Yeah.
what's been your philosophy here of this new endeavor?
Yeah, I can talk a lot better about it now than I did 7 months ago. I'll say that out loud.
There you
Because
go.
a few folks who talked to me 7 months ago said, "Aha, see, I knew you'd get there."
That's why
Um,
I waited for the prime interview.
what I'd say is, when I was like being into this is a highly fragmented space, right? You got hundreds, if not thousands, of highly successful entrepreneurs really understand roofing, and whether they be in commercial or residential, if they're in insurance or retail, like some combination of those four buckets, like there's highly competent people who are very successful and they've figured out their equation in this space, right? With that, what I'd say a gap in the space has been like no one's really thinking about how you put together a platform well in this space and what's it going to take. And like I want to caveat that I haven't figured it out. I'm just saying there's an opportunity there.
Right,
So
right.
just like so as I'm talking here, I want the audience to understand this isn't me speaking from the top of the hill. It's me saying there's something
Right.
there that I want to poke at. And for me, it comes back to one of the first things I said to the team after I met them was there's something very powerful in doing the roof of a home, right? It's typically the biggest investment that people have in their lives, right? Because if you think about it, I think roughly I heard somewhere like 80% of Americans have less than $4,000 in their bank accounts, right? So if they're living in a home, that's typically their biggest investment. So the roof is going to be key, right? And then underneath that, there's an emotional connection they have to that roof, right? Which is, hey, do I really want the people that live in this home with me that I love very much to have water dripping on their head, right? And I'm using that to be illustrative, right?
Right.
But also honest, right? I mean, it's the thing that garners the emotion of security that a roof brings to a home, right? So being able to build a platform, which is kind of where I started, and tying that back to that mission of why are roofs important to people? Like if you can bring those things, two things together, I think there's going to be something special in this industry.
Yeah, and I think what you're seeing is, I say what you're saying is you see opportunities in it. Every time I open my mouth and say something like that, people are like, "What is it?" I'm like, "I'm still working. I don't know
Yeah.
exactly the formula, but I see it. I see it." And so coming in with RAFTRx and a slew of companies affiliated with it, has it been fun? Kind of as new, just to try to meet all the people and put all the pieces together and build what's already been a great start for so many companies.
Yeah, it's been fun because there's a lot of great experience in these businesses, right? And they've been very warm. Look, there's also been challenges, right? I just don't want people to think everything's fun because it's been challenging at times, right? But what I have found is there are more people in this industry willing to help and educate than there are now. And because of that, it is fun. And it shows the opportunity that exists to go do something different.
Yeah, so you have under RAFTRx, just for our audience to follow, there's a bunch of different affiliated companies serving a lot of the
Right.
US, correct?
That is. So RAFTRx is currently 5 companies. Um, Perimeter in the southeast, which is kind of Georgia up through Kentucky and Tennessee and South Carolina. Sorry, guys. Humboldt, who's in the Carolinas and eastern Georgia. Regal, who is also kind of in the same space as Perimeter, pretty much. Um, our Blue Hammer team, which is down in Texas, and then we have Mills Roofing and Siding, which is up in Michigan and Northern Ohio. So currently 5 companies.
Wow, that's
Um,
impressive.
Soon to be more, working
Yeah,
on it.
yeah.
But yeah, always going to grow.
You got to have a you got to have a tease for the future, right?
Yeah, I got to have a tease for the future.
Well, I was looking at the map. I have my suspicions of the map growing, so it's impressive to watch and know so many of the team. It's really fun to watch. But saying fun is not always right. When there comes change is always not fun. There's lots of moving parts when you're making changes.
That's right. There is a lot of moving parts when you're making changes, and some of them aren't easy, right? I think sometimes one thing I will say from the CEO seat is sometimes when difficult changes are made, people look at you like, what's the why behind it, and can you share? And there must be some conspiracy or something going on, and it's like sometimes it's just people don't understand it. Sometimes it's just growth,
Right.
right? It's no different than your teenager who goes off to college, comes back home after college, and decides, hey, you know what? I'm gonna go get an apartment with my friend and try to figure this thing out on my own, right?
Right.
It's not a conspiracy. They didn't like think ahead to do that. It's kind of the evolution of them as a person, and sometimes those changes and those decisions are more that. And actually, I would say it's often that
But
more so than it is something is wrong in air quotes.
exactly. I mean, it's 100%. And, so with your, I guess with your team and your different companies and, dealing with, private equity and a very family oriented firm like that, your role, when people say, what do you do all day long? Gainer, are you on the phone? Are you working with your team? I mean, and I know that's a loaded question, but how about this? What do you feel is the most important 2 or 3 things that you do each week?
I have to keep the team focused on the few strategies we align to. As a leader in the business, it's really hard. It's easy for people, including myself, to deviate. Like, here's a new shiny object I should go chase, right? So I have to keep them focused on the strategies that we all agree to. That's one. Two, I have to make sure they resonate with where these businesses started, came from, which is usually the people and the customers. Like, keep them real focused on that. And then the third is, like, as the leader of the company, I have to think about what's coming, right? So what's in our future? That could be, this is where the whole thoughts of what are the threats against you, but what are the opportunities for you, and where can you kind of lean in a little bit to do something different? That's the third bucket, right? And managing those three every single day is always a part of my job.
That's spot on. That's spot on. Well, are there any mantras or books or mentors you've had in your career, videos, whatever, that have really made a difference for you?
Yeah. So I one of my mentors was well, not a mentor, but somebody I really admired. And it's going to sound cliche, but I'll explain why. So I'm an Albert Einstein fan. I always have been since I was a kid. As a kid, you just admired his intelligence and his knowledge. As an adult, I admired his humanity, which people really don't understand about him. Right? Here's a guy that, if you want to talk conspiracies, was emigrated here from Germany in World War II times
Mhm.
because he was fearing persecution, and came here and like was brilliant, was told, hey, look, we need you to go work on a nuclear project that could help us with energy development for the world, and then ended up having it become a weapon which he was unaware of, and is primarily used for Hiroshima, right? So,
Right.
and he lived with that guilt for a really long time. And I read a number of books on him, and one thing that I took away from him was, as a human being, he recognized that intelligence wasn't everything. Because although he was smart, scientifically speaking, he wasn't smart enough to see that he was being taken advantage of, right? And that cost him something. So that for me was like the human side of it really impacted me as I read that, right? In terms of like self-help books, I read them all the time. I
Yeah.
have a stack of them here. If I would quote one that I really liked, there's an author called, I'm looking down at it, I want to make sure I get it right. It's by Max James. It's called "The Harder You Fall, the Higher You Bounce." So I want to make sure I say it right. And he tells a really unique story about himself. And I like books like this because they're not so much self-help books. They're more, they teach you about somebody and how they got to be successful.
Exactly.
And in all his failures in life, and how each one of those kind of was a build for him to get to where he was. He's very successful now as an author and a coach. But he goes through a lot of his history to do that. I recommended that book to actually a few of our workers last week, and they said, I don't necessarily, I've done a lot of Covey stuff over the years, and I'm a Dale Carnegie graduate and all those blinking words, but I guess as I've gotten older, I really look for those books that says, hey, I really want to understand somebody who's a human being like me, and like what their journey was and how they got to be successful. That impacts me more than somebody who's going to tell me a theory of how I should be successful.
It's funny you said that is, so I went probably when I was in my 30s, and I got on this kick. I started reading presidential authorized biographies, I started going way back to, Truman and FDR. My whole process was not just to understand them, but all the people they interacted with, and how those dynamics still are very much the same if you just take out the technology and stuff in 2024. People thought I was crazy, but because like you've done the 7 Habits and all the kind of stuff, but you can learn a lot by people's stories, or people who are the top of their craft, top athletes, it's the falling down and getting back up and falling down and getting back up. So I like that one. I have to check that book out.
Yeah, it is. It's a good book. I met the author a number of years back. He signed my book. He happened to be at a conference. I just enjoyed it. I enjoyed his conversation, and he sat and talked to me for 10 minutes. He didn't have to, by the way.
Yeah.
I was just somebody in the audience, and we talked for a little while, and gave me an authored book. It was super interesting. I read it, and it really resonated with me.
All right. Well, I'm going to check it out. All right. We got a few minutes left. So what are you at this point most thankful or proud of in your life? I mean, I know your family's important to you as well.
Yeah, well, my family,
Yeah.
right? So I failed to mention that in my story.
Well, that's why I was like, I forgot to ask you that.
Right? Um, I have a wife and 2 kids. Both my sons are, both my sons are adults, I would say, one more than the other, just like everybody else. But my eldest son chose the route of blue collar worker. He's a union custodian in high school, and I'm very proud of him. That's what he wanted to do. Right? There's no pressure from dad to do what dad did or follow dad's journey. Right? And my younger son's going to be a sophomore in college and runs D2 track and field. And obviously, he didn't get it from this physique, so that's on him. I give him a lot of credence from it, but that's really important to me. Family is important, and it's important because we spend a lot of, when you're successful, you spend a lot of time away from home. And when I say time away from home, it's not always physically. Sometimes
Yeah.
it's just mentally, right? And it's important that when you are home, that there's a presence that you have and you pay attention to the people that are important to you because they deserve that because they also have the tolerance and patience that enables your success.
Yeah, my wife and kids have called me out a number of times, especially when I was a little bit younger, of being on the phone. You could be in the same room, but not be present.
Yes, that's right.
So people are like, I'm here. You're like, well, you're not mentally here. You're you're looking at your phone or replying to a text, and so working to set those boundaries, I think you're saying, is very key. But no, I know how important your family was, so I don't want to let that pass.
I appreciate it, Brian.
No, of course. All right, so we've got a few minutes left. What's a quick fun fact about you that most people wouldn't know?
I speak 3 languages.
Oh, wow.
I grew up, my dad is Turkish and my mom is Albanian, but she comes via the old Yugoslavia because that's where she lived. I didn't know this till I was older, but my dad insisted in the first 5 years of myself and my sister's life that we speak the other 2 languages at home because he said, I knew once you guys were in school, it was off to the races, right, on English. So I had this little window to put these languages in your head. And, it was really impactful for me. So, the
That's
ability to be a multilingual person, a lot of people, maybe they can guess it because of my name sometimes, but sometimes they can't because I don't have an accent or anything like that. But yeah, multilingual.
Well, that's fantastic. I love it. I love it. All right. So as we kind of come to the end here, Gyner, what anything else that I failed to ask you that you want to share for our audience as we kind of come to the end?
Yeah, what I would say to the audience is I'm in the private equity world, right? And people hear the good and the bad and the news media and all this other stuff. I always say to them, private equity is no different than any other business, whether that be family, corporate, private equity. There's always going to be good and there's always going to be bad, right? And it's always easier to report on the bad.
Oh, yeah.
And it's important that you recognize that there's a lot of success stories out there. And working with a good partner like the one we have, there's an enablement there that they give you to go drive success differently and personally and build a really great business. Because I tell my team all the time, great business is more important to me than scale or anything else I'm going to do.
100%.
Right? So, if I boil the ocean on the tangibility of that, my Google 5-star review is going to be always more important to me than anything else. Right.
100%.
And so I always tell people, like, when you hear the private equity, it's not the boogeyman, right? Go online. There's very successful ones out there. There's ones like Rourke Capital and based in Atlanta, actually, that brought, a fast food restaurant like Arby's kind of from the brink to, we all talk about, we have the meats now, right?
Yeah.
It's all in your head, right? So there's good ones out there too. And know that, spend a little bit of time to understand where the good ones are and the good they bring.
Well, man, we could go on forever. And like I said, we may have to do a sequel to this. Now, like in a year, when all the plans develop, we'll just have to have an update of what the heck's going on. But with that in time, and your three things you got to work on today, and now you've inspired me. I got a book to read. I've got 3 things to focus on. But no, again, I really appreciate you coming on the Community Connection Show. Great knowledge, and everybody can find everything under RAFTRx for all the companies. Just Google it, RAFTRx.
That's right. No E.
No E. No E. All right. Well, again, thanks for coming on, my friend, and I'm going to close this out.
Thank you. I appreciate it, Ryan.
Absolutely. Well, folks, you've been listening to another Community Connection Show with Ryan Sauers, special guest Gyner Ozgul, CEO, RAFTRx, with us today. We'll see you again next time.
This has been the Community Connection Show with Ryan Sauers. Stay on the lookout for new or past shows with community leaders wherever you listen to your podcasts. And if you want to see the video interview of any show, visit communityconnectionstv.com. Thanks for tuning in, everyone, and we will see you next time.